It's on.
Okay, so we resume the session, as I said, with a slight change. And I've clustered some of the presentations under the general topic of climate and migrations, but they're not exactly on that, each one of them. So first we will have Franklin. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. So I'll be speaking to you about how climate change might be has been affecting one of the indigenous communities in Kenya, and I've titled my presentation "From Livestock Herding to a New Life to a New Way of Life: The Case Study of Maasai Community in Kenya." So the context of this presentation is basically the drought crisis that we've been witnessing in Kenya throughout the periods of from 2016 all the way to 2021, and it's been a consistent drought season for us, which has never happened in Kenya before. And this drought has really disrupted the main livelihood activities of some of the communities, and the Maasai community being one of them. So this is just a map of Kenya and some of the areas in orange which have been really affected by the drought that we've been witnessing in the last 6 or 7 years. And one of the activities that is being threatened is the pastoralism, which is a main economic activity and a cultural activity as well in many communities in Kenya. And the drought can mainly attributed, among other factors, to the change in climatic patterns. So the Maasai community is one of the indigenous ethnic communities in Kenya, and they found, or they live mainly in the southwest part of Kenya, with a population of approximately 1 million people. And they are a nomadic group whose lifestyle and whose culture, we can say, mainly revolve around their livestock. The livestock is like a main ingredient of their culture, and livestock can be cattle, sheep, but to be more specific, we can say cattle. So cattle is an integral part of their culture, and for example, a man's wealth in a Maasai community will be measured by how many cattle they own. So cattle is like everything. It means everything to them, and it's not only economically but also culturally. So the current drought that we've been experiencing is actually like swept away almost over 2.5 million livestock, and the Maasai people have been really affected. It's very painful for them to lose cattle, because for them cattle is everything. They have a belief that God gave them their God. They call their God Enkai, and they believe that their God gave them all the cattle that you can find in this world. So this explains some of the issues maybe you might find in Kenya, issues to do with cattle rustling or stealing of cattle. It's because to them, they believe all the cattle in the world belongs to them. So it's when they engage in this cattle rustling or cattle stealing, for them it's like taking what belongs to them, you know. So during this period, most of them had to For example, what you're seeing in this picture to my right is one of the communities selling the few cattle that remained, and they're actually selling them at a throwaway price, because instead of losing all the cattle. So this is one of the solutions that they thought of. And we can try and think, or we can try and question, like, okay, so how has the Maasai been dealing with drought in the previous years? Because it's not a new thing, it's been there. Only that the drought patterns that you're observing right now are quite extreme compared to the previous years. For example, typically maybe a drought will be observed maybe once in 10 years, but from the statistics that you've just seen there, it was a 6-year consecutive period of drought. So mainly the Maasai people depend on the traditional indigenous knowledge to maybe, for example, predict drought patterns in the future. So for them, it's all based on the indigenous knowledge system, and this knowledge they normally pass from they normally pass it from the older generation to the young ones. And as you can see from that picture, from this picture, sorry, the Maasai the Maasai kids or children, they actually start taking care of the cattle or the animals at a very young age. So they start interacting with the environment, with nature, with the wildlife at a very young age. So it's something that they acquire from a very young age, and also the elders or the Maasai elders or their parents, they are the ones who are responsible for passing this knowledge to them. So just a few examples of maybe how they used to predict drought in the past. So for example, you had methods like reading of the intestines. So once they slaughter the animals, they would take out the intestines, and they had a technique that they use to, I don't know how they do it, but it's like they foretell the future by looking at the intestines of the animals. That's what you have in this picture. Another method maybe could be, they have their own traditional calendar, and their traditional calendar is basically okay, we don't have like the normal calendar like from January to February. So they name their different months according to maybe the behavior of based on the behavior of animals, or based on the behavior of based on the weather conditions, and depending on how a month starts, they will know which month it is in their calendar. So, for example, for them, maybe that it's not like, okay, January to February. It could be maybe they begin the month in March, then they move to October, they come back to July. So depending on the weather conditions and the animal behavior. But what we are seeing is that right now with this climate change, it's very difficult to depend on these traditional techniques that they used to have. They used to like follow, because of the different or the unpredictable climatic patterns. So that's why there's a need of maybe integrating this knowledge together with the scientific knowledge to see how we can mitigate these challenges. And this is just a chart showing Kenya being among the least carbon emitters. This is statistics in 2021. Kenya was, if you compare the figures in the global scale, Kenya was only emitted like 0.03% of the global cumulative CO2 emissions. And yet we can see how we were like one of the countries that were actually really affected by the climate change, because this drought can actually be attributed to the climate change. And we see this despite Kenya emitting like very little CO2. There, as we see from this chart, we were ranked number 7 in the 2020 climate risk index, behind India and Sri Lanka, as one of the countries that were really affected by climate change. So just to conclude, I can say there's a need to come up with collaborations, working with the indigenous community, and engage them in coming up with solutions and solutions to sustainable climatic conditions. And as we've been seeing throughout this conference, I need to like use a bottom-up approach, because they have their knowledge, they have the contribution that they can put towards this climate problem. So we need to work with them. And also just one of my proposals is that we need to also come up with a system that rewards like the less emitting countries, because as you've seen, I don't want to point fingers, but just saying that, I don't want to compare the figures with other countries, but I was just showing that Kenya really is one of the least countries. And just to finish, I have that 45 seconds video, which is like a testimony of one of the pastoralists in Kenya. Okay, maybe. Okay, no problem. But it's basically one of the communities one of the community members who was just like saying the same things I've been saying. So I don't know.
Ningependa hao wakubwa ambao wanakutana, kabla watengeneze mikakati labda ile wanaona ya kwamba inafaa mfugaji kama ule pastoralist, waweze pia kuhusisha hawa pastoralism, ili kile inatoka pia kutoka hawa pastoralism inaangaziwa, ili isikuwe ni decision making ya wale tu wanataka kusaidia bila yule ambaye anataka kusaidika, kwa sababu hapo ndo itakuwa nzuri, kwa sababu wamepata from the source ya kwamba hii ndio nahitaji ili nisaidike.
And now Umaima.
Hello, everyone. So, my name is Umay Maradi, and today I'll be presenting you the Manzil Jerbia. It's a case of adaptive architecture and sustainable lifestyle of the local inhabitants of the island of Jerba in Tunisia. The context of this presentation. This presentation delves into the culture and practices of the Jerbian community in Tunisia. It's shaped by the island's rich history and unique geography. It emphasizes the community's diverse yet harmonious nature and adaptive architecture and sustainable lifestyle to the environment challenges. The methodology of the presentation, we will go over some of the main points leading to our problematic, the introduction of the island of Jerba, some example of the adaptive architecture and sustainable lifestyle, climate change and evolution of practices, and then a small conclusion. Jerba is located is an island. It's located off the southeast coast of Tunisia at the northern eastern tip of the Maghreb. It covers an area of 25 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide, which makes 514 square kilometers, and is the largest island in the southern Mediterranean. Jerba Ladous, it's a word we say for Jerba. It translates in English to incorrectly soft or sweet because of the mild weather of the island. The island has a Mediterranean climate and with mild winters and hot summers, and is also known for the strong winds. To access the island, we have only three possibilities. We have the Roman road of Jerba, which goes for 7.5 kilometers and was built by the Romans over the ruins of a Punic road, and then was rehabilitated by the government in 2006. This road has the problem, which is when the water goes up, the road disappears. So there's a second possibility of going by boat from the small side or by the airport, which is one of the three biggest airports in Tunisia. This is some pictures of the landscape of the island, which has beautiful seas and is really known for the really serene sceneries and landscape. But also, as you can see, it's not a green island. It's basically yellow with palm trees mostly. So the culture of the geometry of the island, added to the mildness of its weather, of its climate, and secluded nature, has attracted through the centuries a lot of communities and ethnic groups who chose to settle within its unique environment, but it also has attracted a lot of the powerful entities in the Mediterranean. And now, actually, the culture in Jerba is a unique blend of Amazigh, Arab, and Jewish cultures with influences from other Mediterranean cultures. Now we'll talk about the adaptive architecture and sustainable lifestyle of the Jerbian community. Jerba is a very unique example of adaptive architecture. We can talk about every type of architecture, or we're gonna need another 10 days of Apheleia. So I just chose one example, which is the manzil. The manzil is an Arabic word which means a house, but this house is not only for residential purposes, it also has economical, religious, and sorry, and I forgot the word. Anyways, it's a very complex architecture. I'm gonna explain a bit. A typical manzil is composed of different buildings. It is limited by a tabia, which is it's not a fence. It's actually big. I forgot how to speak in English. I'm sorry. It's I'm gonna speak in franglais. Okay, I'm trying in English. So it's a big pile of dirt, basically, which covers the whole area, which limits the whole area. It is, the central part is the houj, which is the residential house of the owners of the house. But it also has other buildings, such as the makhzen, Makhzen in Arabic means storage, but here we have two makhzen. One makhzen can be used for the
Sorry, interrupting.
Okay. The makhzen can be used for when we invite people over because of the culture. It's not appropriate for people who are strangers to sleep in the same house of the owners. We also have a second makhzen, which is used actually for the storage of what we produce on the land. Another structure is the ashusha, which is basically a barn for the animals. We can also find a matbakh, which means kitchen, and it's used for cooking for people we invite over or for special occasions. We also have, and this is something that's really typical of the Gerbian architecture, since you've seen it's mostly desert and there's not a lot of rain. So we have actually two possibilities to collect water. We can have the bir, which is a well, to be able to get the water. And also we have the mejel ufaskeya, which is a technique that was evolved there to collect the rainwater, and we can use it later for the animals, for the agriculture, or even for the people when we don't have enough water in the well. A manzil can also have sometimes weaving workshops where women from all over can work and can produce some of the traditional dresses and can be sold. So that's part of the economical part. I'm going to be speaking fastly about the Housh. The Housh, which is the central part of the manzil. It is usually constructed with a central courtyard, which serves as a gathering place for the family and friends, and is surrounded by a walkway covered with pergola, which you can't see here, because this house, this one doesn't have a pergola, and it's abandoned, so we could access it to take pictures. It is typically made of local materials such as stone, mud, and palm fronds, and is designed to withstand the hot climate of the region. The walls are thick and sturdy, which helps to keep the interior cool in the hot summer and warm during winter. The housh can be surrounded with 2 to 4 rooms. Which room can have a different function depending on the number of the family members. And the roofs of these rooms are often domed or made of palm fronds. You can see it here, but this is how the room is. It's a rectangular shape where you have a small stairs, and here you can find the bed where the individual can sleep. Under it is the mistham, which is a type of bathroom, but without a toilet, where people can shower and wash up. And over the bedroom, we can find domes in every corner to keep the room fresh. Or we can find the pergolas, which also have the isolation part. And another unique feature of the housh includes the use of niche for storage, which are built into the thick walls. And we have also built-in benches for seating, usually located in the courtyard. And now, since 2012, the island of Jerba has been inscribed in the tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Site, being one of the, either for its outstanding architecture, but also for its really specific nature. It has been for 2 criteria, number 5 and number 6. 5 for the type of land use of the Gerbia, which constitutes a traditional land use of and human interaction with the environment. And the criteria 6, since the island of Jerba, which was actually referenced in one of when Homer's writings, and has taken part in some important events in the antiquity. Now, faced with climate change and evolution of practices, as you know, the Mediterranean countries are one of the most endangered countries with facing the climate change and global warming. And Jerba was actually in COP27. Jerba was one of the cities which are most endangered. So now we are we are rethinking the architecture of Jerba, and we are seeing the good practices. And now we have new sustainable initiatives that are taking the architecture in Jerba as an example to build a new sustainable lifestyle and new contemporary architecture that can be sustainable in the future. We have here two initiatives. One is Ibni Ecolo, which is an architecture agency which works with the techniques and the materials and the knowledge of the German architecture to build new contemporary buildings. And the second one is L'Ombre du Palmier, and it's a startup which has for a role to educate people and to pass the knowledge of how to construct in an ecological way. And the adaptation of the local community facing these hard changes have adapted their traditional practices and knowledge to new technologies and economic opportunities with using the knowledge they have already with in new ways for agriculture. And also we can see a lot of initiatives that aim to raise awareness about climate change and its impacts to provide training and support to local communities. As a conclusion, overall, the example of the Gerbian community highlights the importance of community-based approaches in addressing natural challenges and building resilience. It also underscores and practices can play in shaping and preserving the identity of local communities and their ability to adapt and thrive in changing world. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present a community gardening initiative in Recife, Brazil, that is called Jardim Secreto do Poço da Panela. So first of all, I'd like to present the objective of this presentation is to present the specificities of this community garden and to examine how it contributes to the enhancement of water heritage and the city adaptation to climate change, taking into account this document called Recife's Local Climate Action Plan that was published by Recife City Hall that establishes goals and actions to mitigate the impacts of climate change on the city. So I did a bibliographical analysis based on scientific articles, dissertations, theses, and also institutional guides and plans in local newspapers. First of all, starting from the city scale, I'd like to explain briefly the relationship between Recife and its waters. So Recife is a coastal city northeastern Brazil, where the sea, the rivers, the mangroves, and the waterlogged areas play a really important role in its landscape. And because these water courses and water bodies have influenced the occupation and also the traditions of the city, they are not perceived only as a natural heritage, but also as a cultural heritage. However, since the end of the 19th century, the city fabric has turned its back on the river, on the rivers and mangroves specifically, and it is now these areas are threatened by anthropogenic factors such as pollution and deforestation of native species, also the landfill of rivers, of river branches and mangroves, and also the lack of proper sanitation infrastructures that also represents a problem to the preservation of this ecosystem. So turning its back to the waters has brought major problems to the city, and it is, according to a 2014 IPCC report, Recife is the 16th most vulnerable city on the planet to the effects of climate change, and it would be the first city in Brazil to succumb to rising sea level. And according to Recife local climate action plan, the main impacts of climate change on the city are flooding, landslides, caused especially because of heavy rainfalls, heat waves, communicable diseases, meteorological drought, and sea level rise. So we can see how water plays an important role in this landscape, not only at its origins, but also at it as a threat. There's this contradictory relationship, and it shows us how the city needs to establish an harmonious relationship with water. So, how to tackle it? The local climate action plan, which establishes two main objectives, which are becoming carbon neutral by 2050 and promoting climate adaptation and resilience. They present a few recommendations and programs that should be implemented in order to achieve these goals. And I decided to highlight a few, such as restoration of natural water courses, mangroves, and coastal vegetation, creation of wooded public spaces, community empowerment, implementation of agroecology, and strengthening of municipals' education for sustainability program, which are important to deal with the vulnerabilities that I just mentioned. So having this context, taking this context in account, I'd like to present now the specificities of this community garden. So it's a garden that was built in the Poço da Panela neighborhood, in a neighborhood in Recife that dates back to the 18th century, that was built on the grounds of an old sugarcane mill. And it's because of the architecture of the place, and also the presence of the river and the vegetation, it is an area protected by environmental and historical zoning laws. And despite being one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Recife, it is also home to a few low-income communities, and also on the same side of the neighborhood, but also on the other side of the river, because the river in Recife, the Capibaribe River in Recife, also represents some kind of class division. It's an element of division of the social classes. So the area where the garden was built was an abandoned 3,000 square meter lot on the banks of the Capibaribe River, full of garbage. and it was transformed in 2017 by a group of residents of the neighborhood that decided to change the situation. So one person in specific started the project and then invited other residents of the neighborhood to design a plan with objectives, tasks, and deadlines. And since then, they did topographical and botanical surveys, landscape design, meetings with members of the municipality, and presentation to the community. And the first planting of species took place in August 2017. And in these pictures, we can see the difference of the area from 2017 to, and the last picture was taken in 2023, which shows how this garden, even in a small scale, has changed the neighborhood's landscape. And since 2017, this space was turned into a garden, a community garden, where people can come together to live, contemplate, and preserve nature. It is also a center for environmental education, where an agroforestry system was implemented. And the members of the project, which has grown over the years, said that it was also a tool of strengthening social cohesion, since the different classes, the different classes came together to build this garden. It's also a place for cultural events, such as film exhibitions and literary fairs and artistic performances. And since 2018, it was also recognized as an important initiative by the municipality, who donated furniture to the project, and it now has a plan to integrate this project to a bigger urban project that is a system of parks along both sides of the banks of the Capibaribe River. So when we compare the actions carried out by the community garden with the actions recommended by Recife's local climate action plan, we can see that they establish a dialogue, although the community initiative was not planned by any institutional organization. So we can see that public participation, protection of the river ecosystem, creation of a wooded space, implementation of agroecology, rehabilitation of a vulnerable area, and strengthening of environmental education program were all actions that implemented by the community garden of Poço da Panela. And although it's a local scale initiative, it demonstrates the capacity of bottom-up initiatives and organized communities to transform their territory, enhance their heritage, and adapt to climate change. So the references.
Good afternoon. It is my immense pleasure to thank Professor Dr. Osterbeek and Professor Faswa Sima to invite me and for the logistic support and giving me a privilege to present my presentation. So today I would like to speak about the community-based conservation of geoarchaeological settlements of the Sundarban World Heritage Sites of Bangladesh in the consequences of the climate change adaptation in Global South. So, as you see the map, it's a red color and green color map. It's dividing the Global South and Global North. The Global South is generally understood is referred to the less economically developed countries. It is a broad term that comprises a variety of states with diverse levels of economic, cultural, and political influences in the international order. It It is difficult to trace the real history of the Sundarbans. But as you see in the map, this Sundarban is a World Heritage Site declared in 1987, then Ramsar Site in 2019, and it's also the network of World Man and Biosphere. It's also covering parts of India and also Bangladesh. The major portion in Bangladesh, around 6,000 square kilometer. The evolution of Sundarban is a delta region, and Bangladesh is also a delta. All the sediments coming from the Himalayas, passing through the Ganges-Brahmaputra delta, and this delta is still active and always flowing the sediments more than 1.5 billion tons per year. And this delta building process is a biotidal process at the southern frontier of the Ganges-Brahmaputra delta, was responsible for the phase accretion of all the seafront islands of the Sundarban. 5 to 2,000 years ago, it was raised by the deposition of sediments from due to the soil erosion in the Himalayas. So you are also, this is also developed by the tidal actions, like daily high tide and low tide actions, and also the spring tide and the ebb tides. Why Sundarban is so crucial? It's the place of the world famous Royal Bengal tiger. It's an endangered species now. Only 105 numbers are still present, and 50 species of reptiles, 8 species of amphibians, and more than 240 species of insects are present in this region. And Sundarban generates a service worth around 273 million to 714 million per year. And Sundarban is also the region of the first line defense among the typhoon or cyclones that we face every year as a low-lying country. And so Sundarban is our lifeline. And this forest is named after a specific trees. It's called Sundari. It's a beautiful in meaning in English. And there are also several problems. But I would like to draw the attention of the archaeological sites that we discovered in 2016. One of our fishermen, he discovered that there is a site, maybe an old architecture in the coastal line. Due to the coastal rise, it was emitted, and it was discovered by the group of professors from the Jahangirnagar University and also like the professor from the archaeology in Kumilla University. The person is working. It's situated in the Satkhira region of the Shyamnagar Upazila. It's very far to reach. It's in the coastal region. You can see the behind the forest. During the high tide, it's submerged under the water. So it's really tough to identify this area and protect. But the local community, like the fishermen, they discovered first. They informed us. We took intervention in this area. So according to the brick structure, this could be a possibility of 100,000 to 102,000 years old, and it can be indicated also that there is a port industry or salt making industry, because there are a lot of ceramics were discovered and 3 steps of ceramics were inscribed. So it was defined as a port of salt making industry. Another site, it's not so far from the Sundarban. It's the human settlement of the temple-like structure. It was in the vicinity of the Kopilmuni region of Khulna district, of Paikgacha Upazila, like third order administrative district of Bangladesh. Quite a few ancient relics, like the burnt rice, cowrie shells, and statues. Like you can see the head of the statues and the shards of the amphoras and also kind of the vessels. And there are school outreach program in the picture. Students are bring back to sending the knowledge of the archaeology and the geological structure of this area from the school. So what is the challenge of our Sundarbans? There are a lot of challenges. In the figure you can see the water is coming from the sea, it's submerging, and it's also devastating the roads. And people are trying to get the fresh water because it's very scarce in this area due to the saline water problem. So the main problems are coastal erosions, climate change, and also sea level rise and the land subsidence, environmental degradation, natural resources management, lack of data and information, and inadequate capacity of our government and as well as communities. That means to the challenges. The combined effect of the high rate of sea level rise in the Bay of Bengal and the land subsidence has been an effective sea level rise in the Sundarbans area that is nearly 3 times as much as the global average at 8 millimeter per year. And satellite images reveals that it's advancing 200 meter per year in the parts of Sundarbans, and a total of 170 square kilometers is under the sea between 1973 to 2010. And you can see the picture of the Royal Bengal tiger and also the new metaphor or the breathing organ of the Sundari, like the mangrove forest. This is a picture was taken by wildlife photography. And in the left side, there is a picture of a recent picture, like 3 tigers were coming in the local forest office. And they are, due to the scarcity of the food and also like people are intervening the tiger's zone. So this is the problem, like to manage these things. And the cultural heritage. As Bangladesh is a Muslim-dominated country, but this part is dominated by the Hindu community. But there is a coexistence of culture. Like this is the idols of Hindu community, but still Muslims are also respected. It's known as the forest deity or the goddess. But in the right side of the picture, you can see there's a beard man. He is a Muslim community, but Hindu people also still worship him as a god to protect from the tiger. This is their belief. And there are a lot of epics also, this kind of thing. And people are participating in these kind of activities. So for our intervention, for the adaptation, which community we should take care? Like we do some social survey, apart from our geological and archaeological survey. There are 4 groups who are directly involved in the Sundarban area. They are the honey collectors. You can see the picture, the honey are collecting, and there are masks behind their face to protect themselves from the sudden attack of tiger, to make disguise to the tiger. And also like the people are collecting the golpata, it's a kind of roof material people using for building their huts. And people are also usually collecting the carps and shell. They are known as a specific name. And another group, they are collecting the tiger prawn and seed collectors. And these are the women's. So to adapt the theory, like as Bangladesh is a natural disaster-prone country, during early 90s and 70s, like people in the world media, Bangladesh is known as a flood-prone or cyclone-prone country. Billions of people are dying, but now we are adapting too much. Like, although the cyclone effect is like double or tripled due to the adverse climate change effect, but people have adapted, learned how to adapt due to the traditional knowledge and also the modern technologies. We do some community mobilization in this area and participatory science. And we are advising to create some training and workshop for ecotourism in this area to engaging the mass people. And also to engaging the women, like they are sometimes unemployed during the rainy season, to making them handicrafts, to create the public awareness and to cultural activities. We can promote the folklore development, and also the school outreach program that we showed in a previous picture. So what is about the tourism in Sundarban area? Like it was very low during 2000 and 2011, but now it's the data until 2011, it's increasing. But only mentioning to see the tigers and also see the lifestyles of the humans. No archaeological or geological settlements. People are not know about these things. So we would like to incorporate all the information of our archaeological excavation and geological heritage to the tourist and to the mass people, and that will create new avenue for our tourism. That is the concern. To conclude, with all the ethnicities, histories, myths, legends, beliefs, customs, rights, and traditional knowledge, Sundarban is a living museum. Sundarban peoples had improvised a rich tradition of knowledge using their own lives as a laboratory. This enriched cultural heritage is a national wealth of Bangladesh. Traditional knowledge and the social mechanism behind traditional knowledge and practices can provide important insights into conservation and management of natural resources, and thus knowledge is to be comprehended, adapted, and applied in natural resources management of the Sundarban. Community participation for conserving archaeological sites of the Sundarbans could enhance the livelihood standards of local population, and in the long term will reveal and protect the natural history of the area. Thank you so much.
Now the three of you please go. You need to grab probably one chair behind the stage. On your left there will be a chair. And who wants to start?
So my question goes out to Umayma. Is the Menzel a prototype for all the communities, including the Jewish? Is it a prototype for the architecture of all the communities? Or is it only a prototype of Arab Amazigh architecture? Because the case in the Maghreb, usually, even though different ethnicities cohabit in the same region, their architecture usually differs.
Okay.
Okay, thank you to the both of you for your presentation. I have two questions. One goes to Meima also. I think I will not make a mistake. Djerba is a place that is welcoming a lot of tourists each year. You talked a lot about the architecture that they regarding to try to do a sustainable tourism also, like to change the community practices towards a more sustainable that can go in the same way that their goals. And the second question is for Juliana. Did the community well-being increase thanks to this project? Like, are the community is happy about the park? Like, does it improve their way of life? Like, is there studies that have been done on that?
My question was for Reggie. I was wondering, so you showed the graphic of the increase of tourism. Have you also, do you maybe also know what is the most interest things the tourists are going to see when they come? And so I was wondering for this, and with this type of research, can you also include adding the geopark, and how?
Okay, my question is first to Franklin. You told that knowledge is passed through the generation in the Maasai community. I would like to know the methodology through which the knowledge is passed, and what is the actual scenario of the young Maasai children with the relation with their grandparents or their parents. Is it still alive as it used to be, like let's say 20, 30, 40 years before? And the second question is to Rajiv. You mentioned that the Muslim community practicing the Hindu deities. Is it the vice versa as well in that local community? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer Iman first. Actually, as you said, okay, so the Menzel, it's typically an Arab Muslim architecture. It was made by the Ibadit, who ran away to the island of Jerba for seclusion. But we can also find some Menzel who are owned by Jewish people, because in the Gerbian community, it's a really peaceful community, and some Jewish people actually like the architecture and were interested in it, and they own some Menzel. But typically, it's an Arab architecture, and the Jews have another type of architecture it's similar but different. But yeah, but there is some that are similar. And for the question of Camille about sustainable tourism, as you said, Jerba is a really famous tourist destination, and it's majorly made of hotels and mass tourism. And they are indeed trying to make some initiative for sustainable tourism. I don't have a deep knowledge of these initiatives, but what I know is now the major factor is for tourism du masse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charlene. As you mentioned that the number of tourists are increasing, so it's our observation. Like at first, the Bangladeshi people are not too rich, but now they are not rich, but the income capita is increased. That is the first point. That's why people are trying to go around in the country. And the most attractive part is that Royal Bengal tiger, definitely, and to get the wildness and also take the taste of the natural honey that honeybees are honeys are collecting from the nature, and to see the life of Sundarban, and also to taste the fish or the river fish and also the estuarine fish. This is very unique in the Sundarban area. And regarding, like you propose also, is there any possibility of geopark? So I have an opportunity to work with the geo-heritage site. It's the first geo-heritage site declared in Bangladesh in 2018. It's in the northeastern part of Bangladesh, but not in this region, as it's a reserve forest for Bangladesh and also the World Heritage Site. But still, we are thinking to enlarge our capabilities to incorporate the natural beauties, and maybe next time. And for your kind information, like this Sundarban is also take part for the 7th Natural Wonder competition, and it was in the number 12th. So that is for the Charlene answer. And for the Shubham, he asked about the community, like Muslim community and Hindu community that I have touched. So it's like Bangladesh is a secular country, by constitutionally, but all the Muslims are dominated. But this area, people believe in the local beliefs. They have no clash, personal clash, or the honey collectors. There might be Hindu, might be Muslim in nature, but they believe that it's a local term, Bon Bibi, like the forest deity. And another character, it was the Pir, like the Sufi leader, Sufi religious leader of Muslim people. But they protect them from the attack from tiger. So in this reminiscence, people are worship them. But according to Islamic belief, you can't worship or make idol with the people. But people doesn't care. They believe their ancestral things, and it's practicing. But now it's in threat. Like people are getting more fundamentalist, more narrow-minded, but they are still practicing these things. And I can also mention this main name of the archaeological site is the Kopil Muni area. It's also a Muni or Rishi in the Hindu mythology, and it's also a world-known site of West Bengal. It's called Shagor Mela, or the Posh Sankranti, so that was celebrated in the Hindu community. That is my answer. Thank you.
So to answer to both Professor Francois and Shubham, basically what used to happen in the recent, you can say the recent past, so the Maasai children normally would not go to school, would not attend school. So meaning the only way for them to get education was through their grandparents or the community elders. So and this would be passed to them through normally when I used to go to visit the countryside, my grandparents, so they'd normally like sit us like near a fireplace, and near a fireplace in the kitchen. So we have a fireplace, so we'd basically just assemble near the fireplace, and the grandparents would like give us the traditional like true stories, through the experiences, through what maybe they have observed. So this is still happening in the Maasai communities, although with the current education system, it's like it's in a way hindering them from passing this knowledge, because you can imagine. Recently, one of the parents or one of the elders was complaining that with this new education system, you give you send your children to school at the age of 6, and you get them back maybe at the age of 22 once they've graduated from university or something like that. So it's like maybe 18 years without your children. So yeah, it makes sense in a way, but we need to now find like a middle ground of ensuring that this still happens at the same time with them attending the normal school. But parents are also involved, but it's mainly the grandparents, the elders. Yeah.
So answering Camille, because it's a quite recent project, there are still no scientific articles or theses that measure the happiness of the population in that area. But when we read the articles in local newspapers and also if we go through their social media, we can see the comments, the positive comments. We can see that it was really appropriated by the community, but not also the neighborhood community, as we can see the people from other regions of the city go to this garden during the weekends because they hold a lot of cultural events. So I think yes, it was well received. Okay, it was appropriated by the population. Yes.
I have two questions for Franklin. I just know what are the strategies of the Maasai to face climate change, and everybody knows the Maasai thanks to the dogs on TV. I just want to know what or how their relationship with is.
Okay.
Hi, my question goes to Juliana. You were talking about how this garden and this river, there was like really rich people from one side and people with low income from the other, and how this project at the end, it helped with social cohesion and two classes like going together and getting along. So I just wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit further about all of this process, because I don't know, it came to my mind that maybe this difference caused some kind of conflict before, and maybe that this project helped to, I don't know, develop a solution or a way to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question is going to be for Rajib. I want to ask about what have the government done to prevent this submerging area of Sundarban? Has the prevention be successful, or how is the trend from years to come? What are the trends? Are they positive or they're getting worse by time? Thank you.
Okay. So regarding the social cohesion, I'll explain a bit how it works, because this neighborhood, Poço da Panela, he also has low income communities inside of it, because Brazil has a urban planning tool called ZEIS, which is like a zone of special social interest, that has the goal of protecting the low-income communities and avoid their expulsion from their expulsion from their traditional territories. So inside Poço da Panela, there are also a few low-income communities that are called ZEIS. And so it was actually a project that started from both sides, I would say, the high-income residents and the low-income residents, because some of them already had a connection, because one of these residents, he has a service of boat crossing the river that people use a lot, so they had already established a dialogue. So that's kind of how it happened. And yes, what people say is that they actually got to meet their neighborhoods because some of them didn't know who lived next to them. And of course there are differences of class, and it always creates some conflicts, but in an overview, people say that it really helped to connect with their neighbors and that it worked well.
Okay, so to answer to Angel, so I would give you like the context of maybe what they used to do. So, for example, we've seen they would depend on maybe animal behavior to foretell the future, like to foretell whether there's a coming drought or something like that. So with this, they would have maybe strategies like, for example, because first of all, you need to know that they are nomads. So that means they move from place to place, and most of the time they move to places with the greener pastures, you know. So in the event of a severe drought, for example, if just to give you an example, they would, for example, prefer to move to these places with they would favorize more male cattle, for example, because to them male cattle are more resistant to drought, and they can walk longer distance. They can make it to the other end. So that's an example of a strategy that they would use. And they would also at times mix the cattle with other livestock, like sheep, for example, and like just the strategy was mainly involved reducing the number of cattle when they're moving to the other place. As for their relationship with the tourists, yes, it's true that they're also one of the most visited communities in Kenya, mainly because they live in like habitats which are also inhabited by the wildlife, because they've conserved their environments very well. So that's why they attract tourists. But recently we've seen maybe we've seen issues like commodification of their culture, you know. If you're a tourist, maybe you visit the place, you're taken to a Maasai village or to a Maasai community, thinking this is or real or the authentic Maasai community, but maybe it's not the case. They're just maybe doing it. They've come up with the people or neighbors just to do it for their money, like to present something to the tourists. So those are some of the things that we've seen, but you can still find authentic tourists, and they've really authentic Maasais, and they've really done a good job in conserving their culture, despite the influence from the tourists. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Eve. As a government officer from Bangladesh, like I have been privileged to visit these places several times, not only on behalf of Geological Survey, but as an employee from Bangladesh Water Development Board. So to my view, what I have observed and participated, like we adopted the Dutch policy to land reclamation and making polder and dikes, and also like the cyclone shelters for the frequent movement of people during the cyclone, to making the concrete masonry building for the high tide area to protect from the high tide or storm surges. These were the initiative, but for our experience was not good for the poldering effect. Like it was called, it's created the water congestions in the several parts of our Sundarban areas, and it's created misery for the local people. So we eliminated this project. Now, so far, like the multi-billion years project, it's called the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. It's the biggest project ever. It was circulated by Bangladesh government. We are also the part of this project, and several other organizations and countries like the Germany and also Netherlands, our development partner, are engaged with this project. So we are working to adapting this kind of climate change problem, facing all the consequences of climate change as a victim country of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. I will make just brief comments on this. I think all of your work is quite interesting. Maybe Franklin and also Rajib, in your final text, you could clarify more the methods that you have used, some of the questions related to that, and in the text it would be good to have it. I think in the case of Franklin, your work, I think that the dimension of possible social differences within the Maasai, which is a tricky issue to assess, maybe you could touch upon that. Potential, discrepancies, also differences. You talked about the issue of education, so maybe you could exploit a little bit in that direction. By the way, Kenya will probably be it will host probably the hub of bridges for East Africa. And then in the case of Umaima, my question is, it's not so much a question, it's now a recommendation for your written work. Mention has been made about cultural differences, potential cultural differences. This was already touched, but I do think in any case that cultural differences you had in any case mentioned. But again, the social aspect, because you show us a very nice house, and very nice dwelling structures. The question immediately, is it for everyone? And so how strategies can be based, because something that was not so clear in some of your presentations, but particularly in this one, is where is the community-based practice? There are elements, okay, but I think this could be better enhanced in the written texts. Having said this, congratulations again. I think you did a very good work. Thank you. Coffee, and we resume in, if possible, 20 minutes. experience is about to start. Estou a pedir. Já estão todos. Okay, so we will start for the second part this afternoon, and we start with the Rufus, who has been working in Mongolia. Rufus, please start.
I'm not sure why anyone's clapping at the moment. I haven't yet. So yeah, all right, okay, bye. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see you this afternoon. I am Rufus Malim. I am a PhD candidate in heritage, and as Uzbek said, I am conducting some studies on shamanism in Mongolia. But today, this is not what I'm going to be talking to you about. I am talking about changing times and transitioning communities, how modernity and climatic change are impacting the traditional modes of living in Mongolia. So let's have a... So, for those of you who are unaware of Mongolia, it is very much a land of transformation. So it has a population of about 3.4 million, and for those to reference clearly, it is the Outer Mongolia that we're talking about, which is a landlocked country between China and Russia. Traditionally, its mode of lifestyle is pastoral or nomadic. They like to do a lot of herding and basically move and migrate between localized areas within Mongolia, and then they sort of work with the animals and gain a sort of lifestyle that way. It has about 5,000 years of recorded history reference to shamanism in Mongolia, which is quite interesting. And one of the key aspects of Mongolian lifestyle is the combination or the contrast between the pastoralist and agricultural societies. As Mongolia is a mainly pastoralist society, it means that it has a lot of challenges to face when it comes to mobilizing resources, building large urbanized areas, and larger populations, as agriculture is normally what's used to support that kind of lifestyle. In Mongolia, the land is not exactly fertile enough to support that kind of agriculture. So it's very much reliant on international trade for a lot of other resources that it brings in. A moment in history where everything came together very nicely in terms of pastoralism and agriculture resources was during the Mongolian Empire. This is where, because of the state of the pastoralist, the lifestyle, it meant that you could mobilize people and armies very, very quickly and move it over large distances. In agricultural societies, it's much harder to do that, as you have to mobilize people and pay a lot of resources to get them going in the first place. As they're on the move most often, it moves a lot quicker. So as a society that changes and has transitioned quite a bit, even particularly in the 20th century, they were under the rule of the Qing dynasty, which ended in 1911, which they often refer to as the Manchurians. They then transitioned into a semi-state of not exactly a democracy, but a state in their own right, and then experienced a revolution. And by 1924, communism became established in Mongolia, and this effectively led to a process of collectivization and industrialization on a large scale. And so the society moved from a pastoral state of being into this new state. This new state brought a lot of useful parts of economics to their way of life, but also fundamentally changed how they used to operate. So if I go over here, and this ended in 1990, or around 1990. So they then transitioned into a more liberalized economy where they could exchange resources more freely. The cap was taken off the livestock that they were able to use, and so they then became a lot wealthier in certain aspects of their economy, but it then became more prone to damages, particularly by climatic changes or economic forces. So if I move over. So one of these key things is what are called ZUDs. And these are sort of a specific type of famine that particularly comes over during the winter. And Mongolia in general, has experienced ZUDs for a long, long time. They've been used to dealing with them. And they happen in intervals of about 8 years or so. The main issue is that these days they are somewhat slightly more severe, or they're getting more severe. And because of the way that new economic system works, a lot more cattle tend to die off if they're not well prepared for the ZUD. So there's several types. There's a white ZUD, which is when deep snow covers the grass. A black ZUD, which refers to freezing temperatures and lack of snow and forage, so there's basically nothing for the animals to eat. There's a hoof ZUD, which occurs when many livestock converge in a single location. So normally, if there is a problem in a particular localized area, the community will migrate on what's called an otor to a place where the forage is more available for their livestock. The only downside of this is that when lots of people move and lots of livestock moves, they then trample all of the forage there, and so they then cause a new problem, new famine, which can kill off more livestock, as I said, which cause a big problem. And then lastly, of these four, there is an ice ZUD, when there is an impenetrable layer of ice that covers the pastures. And I was communicating with some Mongolians over Christmas, and they were saying that in Ulaanbaatar, temperatures got down to about minus 30 degrees Celsius. A little chilly. So when these happen, if the livestock is killed off, communities will then transfer to the cities, often to sort of escape that way of life and those rapid changes. So they're trying to, there is a mixture of modernity, education, mobility, but there is also a mixture with some of this old style of living, as well as the pasture animals and livestock there as well. Sometimes it mixes better than others, but it causes some problems. So mainly today, the main way they sustain this new way of living in the city is often trading things like copper and iron ores, coal, and then animal hairs. Yes, and so this has been from 1992 onwards. I go to this. How much time have we got? All right, 6 minutes. So yeah, this leads into talking about the science of measuring vulnerability, resilience, and adaptability, or adaptive capacity. So adaptive capacity is the ability to respond constructively to variability and change. So this includes natural disasters and disturbances, and associated with the ability to learn, experiment, and innovate. Whereas vulnerability is defined by the susceptibility to damage or harm, and resilience is the amount of change a system can absorb without altering its essential structure and function. So you can have societies that are very resilient and can take a lot of punishment, but they might not be very adaptable. And sometimes it's trying to balance this adaptability with the resilience in various situations that's key. So for instance, if a culture or community, as we see with these herding communities, stock up on feed or grasses to cope with the animals in the difficult ZUDs, that's a sort of a measure of resilience, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Whereas in the urban lifestyle, they've got a very good shelter from the elements when they're there. So it's got a very high resilience, but trying to adapt it if the climate gets incredibly extreme, or if other situations get very extreme, becomes very, very difficult. So yeah, so households will move to the cities if their livestock is destroyed. So there is a concern that if too many herders leave these local communities, they then suffer a population loss and fail to sustain the human and social capital to continue properly. And of course, this is not exactly a very sustainable state of affairs. So when I went in about June, July 2022, My main focus of my interviews were with shamans. However, I went with nomad science, and we visited some of the local community in the area, and there were some questions that were asked. And there are whole different loads of approaches that the different members of the local community took. Some of them were very worried about the changing times. They were worried about losing their traditional knowledge and values. Others, however, were far more accepting and willing to change. There was one couple in particular that said, we let our children decide what they want to do. We know the world's changing. We know climate is changing. If they want to go to the city and they want to get an education, that's fine. Whereas others said the traditional way of lifestyle is the ideal way to go. And, we think that the new generation is just being really lazy and just can't cope with the hard lifestyle, and they want a nice, soft, cushy one. So there was definitely a change in values and different ideas of how it was going. And there's a lot of the identity is very much rooted in this traditional way of life, this the pastoral way of life. And with the advent of new, modernized and urbanized area, particularly Ulaanbaatar, it's definitely led to a new identity in various other areas. So there is a contrast between what I was told was the countryside and Ulaanbaatar, because Ulaanbaatar effectively acts as a kind of a city-state. So, yes. And then there's also Buddhism and shamanism, which have both seen a resurgence, and shamanism in particular, but I won't dwell too much on that right now. So, how are we doing for time? I can't see that. Right. So, sustainability. Mainly, one of the key things about sustainability in Mongolia is a tricky one to cover, because the urban way of life that they have now is very much dependent on international trade or trade with other partners. Their biggest trading partner is China. And this is what helps to sustain the urbanized growth and everything. One of the other key aspects of it is the mobilization, or logistics, mobilization of resources around the country. For instance, there was a road that we took back from one settlement to the main city, or to another settlement, which took us about 4 or 5 hours. We were told that before the road was built, it would have taken 16. Given that the soil is traditionally poor, not suitable for agriculture but ideal for pastoral, ways of trying to encourage some form of agriculture would probably be an idea, but it definitely complicates this issue. The traditional way of life is, well, I'd argue actually probably more adaptive, because they have managed that way of life for a long, long time. But as they are transitioning to new mode of being, it's coming with these new challenges. So they need to try and find a way to combine this old knowledge, which is very adaptable to climatic change and various other issues, with perhaps the new innovations and urbanization. And so I think that is very much what this is about. And so, thank you very much. No worries. Okay.
Bonsoir à tous. Je m'appelle Amiko Letiam, je suis étudiante au Master d'ICLAM. Tout d'abord, je tiens à remercier M. Osterbeck pour avoir supervisé mon travail. Alors, je vais vous présenter mon article intitulé Les Bassaris, Peuls et Bédiques du pays Bassari au Sénégal, entre acculturation et transformation communautaire. Le pays Bassari se situe au sud-est du Sénégal, dans la région de Kédougou, à 400 km de la côte atlantique et à 800 km de Dakar. Le pays Bassari concerne spécifiquement 3 zones géographiques, que sont la zone d'Endefelo, la zone de Salemata et la zone de Bandafassi. Je tiens d'abord à préciser que l'appellation pays Bassari ne désigne pas un pays en tant que tel, mais elle désigne la partie occupée par les Bassaris au Sénégal. Alors, c'est un paysage multiculturel qui abrite des communautés autochtones issues de différentes ethnies du Sénégal. Il est marqué par un patrimoine naturel riche et diversifié qui s'imbrique avec les pratiques traditionnelles et culturelles, donnant naissance à un paysage remarquable inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en 2012. Les communautés constituées par des groupes ethniques Bassari, Peuls et Bédiques, qui après de longues périodes de conflits sont parvenus à cohabiter pacifiquement. Ils comptent environ 3000 habitants et répartis dans 25 villages. L'inaccessibilité de certains villages avait favorisé le maintien des traditions au sein de la communauté. Cependant, la communauté a subi des migrations, d'abord chez les hommes, ensuite chez les femmes, à la recherche du travail dans les grandes villes. Cette migration, qui s'est de plus en plus accentuée, constitue l'élément déclencheur du processus de modernisation de la population et de leur ouverture au monde extérieur. Alors, pour mieux comprendre les dynamiques sociales des Bassaris, je vais faire une analyse comparative afin de montrer ce qui existait avant et ce qui existe maintenant. Pour ce faire, je vais d'abord présenter les pratiques sociales traditionnelles, ensuite les facteurs de la transformation communautaire des Bassaris et enfin leurs conséquences. Alors, à l'origine, les Bassaris étaient un peuple de chasseurs et de cueilleurs. Toutefois, l'accroissement de la population et des champs avait favorisé la rareté de certains animaux. Avec la présence aussi du parc de Nyokolokoba, les interdictions de chasse étaient de plus en plus réglementées, ce qui les obligeait à changer leurs habitudes alimentaires pour abandonner la viande issue de chasse, du braconnage, au profit des animaux domestiques. Aussi, les Bassaris sont constitués par une société de type matrilinéaire avec 6 à 8 clans matrilinéaires selon les villages. La particularité des Bassaris réside sur le fait que la société a une organisation spécifique qui repose sur un système de classes d'âge qui est constitué par un certain nombre de pratiques et de cérémonies, de principes culturels obligatoires pour chaque tranche d'âge, depuis la naissance jusqu'à la mort. Les échanges se faisaient par troc, ce qui permettait de compenser le déficit alimentaire, et l'agriculture, l'élevage et la chasse étaient devenus leurs activités principales, en plus de la vente de la bière. Les pratiques religieuses des Bassaris étaient marquées par une croyance à une interprétation entre le monde visible et le monde invisible, constituée par des génies et des esprits des ancêtres. Les expressions culturelles étaient marquées par des cérémonies d'initiation ou d'entrée à une nouvelle classe d'âge, occasionnant parfois la sortie des masques traditionnels. En ce qui concerne les facteurs de la transformation communautaire, on a ici les 4 facteurs que sont l'émigration, le christianisme, le tourisme et la modernité. L'émigration, la transformation des pratiques communautaires des Bassaris est d'abord le résultat d'une forte émigration dont la principale cause est l'introduction des travaux forcés dans cette localité. En effet, entre les années 1920 et 1950, les hommes valides étaient soumis à travailler dans les plantations et sur les routes de la région, ce qui était à l'origine d'une émigration des hommes à la recherche du travail. Alors, les destinations étaient les petits villages du Sénégal, du Mali, de la Gambie et des deux Guinées. où ils séjournaient pour une courte période pendant la saison sèche. Mais c'est à partir de 1960, avec l'indépendance du Sénégal, que l'émigration a accru de façon exponentielle et les femmes ont commencé à émigrer aussi. Les choix des destinations ont aussi changé. Les choix étaient plutôt portés sur les grandes villes que sont Kédougou, Dakar et Tambacounda. On note également un changement par rapport à la durée qui passe du temporaire à une émigration de longue durée. Autre facteur, le christianisme. Les changements touchent également les pratiques culturelles avec la conversion des migrants au christianisme, la présence des missionnaires catholiques et protestants dans la région de Tambacounda et de Kédougou a favorisé la conversion des migrants qui partaient dans ces villes. L'adoption du christianisme chez les Bassaris est liée au fait qu'ils trouvent des correspondances entre les sacrements de l'Église et les rites de la religion traditionnelle. Parmi les migrants de longue durée, on note de nos jours des pasteurs, des prêtres, des séminaristes et des catéchistes. Alors, la conversion a eu des effets sur les pratiques cultuelles et culturelles, du moment où certaines pratiques qui n'étaient pas en phase avec le christianisme ont été abandonnées. En ce qui concerne le tourisme, la construction d'une route entre Tambacounda et Kédougou en 1994 a favorisé le désenclavement des pays Bassaris, ce qui résulte de la présence des touristes dans cette localité. Alors, le tourisme a favorisé la création des campements d'accueil des touristes inspirés de l'architecture locale. Les politiques de valorisation des culturels locales pour assurer une attractivité touristique résultent de la perte de sens de certaines manifestations ou cérémonies. Ces expressions qui étaient purement traditionnelles et répondaient à un besoin spécifique se voient aujourd'hui être une source d'attraction touristique. En conséquence, les zones ne connaissent pas le sens initial des manifestations, et ce qui aboutit à une perte de cet héritage. Alors, ce schéma montre les différentes dates importantes en ce qui concerne le processus de transformation des us et coutumes chez les Bassaris. Alors, en ce qui concerne l'émigration, 1920 marque la date de début de l'émigration, comme vous l'avez vu ici, comme je l'ai expliqué ici. En 1950, il y avait de l'émigration aussi de plus en plus, et les femmes ont commencé à entrer en vigueur petit à petit. 1960, avec l'indépendance du Sénégal, on constate une émigration de plus en plus accrue. 1970, c'est la période où on a remarqué de plus de présence de conversion du christianisme des Bassaris. 1994 coïncide avec la construction de la route entre Kédougou et Tambacounda, ce qui a favorisé le désenclavement des pays Bassaris. Alors, ce diagramme montre le processus d'émigration. Vous voyez, en 1925, il y avait déjà une émigration, mais ce n'était pas vraiment importante. Et à partir de 1961, juste après l'indépendance du Sénégal, l'émigration a accru de façon vraiment importante. Chez les femmes aussi, à partir de 1941, c'était juste une émigration vraiment pas importante. Mais à partir de 1960, c'était devenu très important, et le nombre de voyageurs également. Ce schéma représente le nombre d'émigration des hommes et des femmes chez les Bassaris. Alors, ce diagramme montre le processus de transformation qui passe d'abord par l'émigration, comme je viens de le dire tantôt. L'émigration a favorisé le changement des us et des coutumes. Ce changement a abouti à une adoption d'une nouvelle religion qui est le christianisme. Après vient le tourisme avec la construction de la route. Tout ceci a favorisé leur tendance vers la modernité des Bassaris. Alors, pour la transformation et l'acculturation, tout ça a eu des conséquences. Alors, comme conséquence, on note des conséquences sur les activités socio-culturelles et agricoles qui ont été délaissées, la perte de la valeur de l'autorité des chefs religieux locaux, autant pour moi, la négligence des jeunes vis-à-vis de leurs coutumes et des autorités, une baisse de la production agricole qui se traduit par une dépendance du gain découlant de l'immigration, une séparation entre les privilèges économiques et les obligations sociales permettant de satisfaire les besoins sans se conformer au système socio-traditionnel, un changement lié à l'utilisation de plus en plus de produits manufacturés, les formes d'échange traditionnelles sont remplacées par l'usage de l'argent. De même, on note la présence des langues étrangères telles que le Wolof et le français, la transformation des styles de vie des migrants, mais aussi dans les pratiques culinaires avec l'adoption des plats Wolof. Alors, malgré ces différents changements, il n'en demeure pas moins que les Bassaris ont su sauvegarder leurs pratiques les plus importantes, telles que l'initiation qui continue de perdurer malgré le phénomène de modernisation auquel ils font face, même si la période est de plus en plus réduite à cause de la scolarisation des enfants. De même, certains rituels comme la cérémonie des masques sont toujours pratiqués chez les Bassaris, ce qui témoigne de leur volonté de sauvegarder les traditions ancestrales. On retrouve aussi dans les contrées éloignées de la partie orientale du Sénégal des Bassaris minoritaires certes, mais qui continuent de vivre comme avant, c'est-à-dire dans des zones reculées sans électricité. Tout ceci est né du désir de faire perdurer leurs traditions et coutumes léguées par leurs ancêtres.
It's on. Eku warauha, bahukaya. First of all, I'm going to change to French because I'm advocate of linguistic diversity, and I know French is another hegemonic language, but at least we have another option. Anyway, as Wallace Stevens once said, English and French are one and a single language. Tout d'abord, je vais parler de le peuple Guarao de l'Est du Venezuela. C'est un peuple autochtone qui a traditionnellement habité le delta de le fleuve les plus importants du Venezuela, l'Orinoco. Et voici le delta et les points noirs représentent le village de Guarao. C'est le territoire traditionnel, bien que il s'occupe aussi de la péninsule de Paria, tout là-haut. Et il se trouve aussi dans d'autres pays du nord de l'Amérique du Sud, notamment Guyane et Suriname. C'est le delta de l'Orinoco et un écosystème qui a été dominé par les Warao après avoir été repoussé par le Kalina, Musi Matuma, ou connu des langues européennes comme des Caraïbes, qui étaient en pleine expansion guerrière. Et les Warao ont réussi à coloniser le delta. Et après avoir vaincu un peuple précédent, les Siawani. Voici les unités d'habitation de Warao qui s'appellent Hanoko et bien adaptées au climat très chaud du delta. Et la localisation du peuple Warao dans Guyane, Suriname et Venezuela en jeune. Mais c'est une carte des langues avant la conquête européenne. Le problème, le Warao, on était forcé à des activités de mendicité. Et après, une action du gouvernement en 1965, c'était la fermeture du canal le plus à l'ouest du delta, qui s'appelle Caño Manamo. Manamo, c'est le deuxième canal le plus grand du delta. Et ça a provoqué des conséquences pénibles pour la vie de Warao. Parce que la fermeture du canal, sous prétexte d'améliorer les conditions pour les cultures et l'élevage dans les deltas, a provoqué l'entrée des eaux de l'océan dans les deltas et a exposé les pyrites qui se trouvent dans les sous-sols, qui a fini par saliniser et tuer la vie, les poissons, saliniser les eaux, donc l'eau n'est pas plus potable. Et à ce moment-là, les Warao ont été repoussés vers les principales villes du Venezuela et pour pratiquer la mendicité. Les principales villes du Venezuela se trouvent au nord du pays. Ce sont Caracas, Valencia, Maracaibo, et parmi autres. Et jusqu'à les années 2010, jusqu'à récemment, les Warao ont pratiqué la mendicité dans les principales villes vénézuéliennes. En même temps, le delta est sujet à forte pression, notamment l'exploitation du pétrole, du gaz et des industries de bois. Bien qu'il existe aussi des activités d'orpailleurs, surtout dans la région sud de l'État de Delta Macuro, qui est l'État le plus à l'ouest, le plus à l'est du Venezuela, qui complique la vie dans la région. Aussi, il existe l'État de Delta Macuro se trouve en route, fait partie de la route de trafic de drogue vers les Antilles. Donc, c'est une des causes d'autres criminalités de la région. Mais après la crise multifactorielle du Venezuela, l'activité de la mendicité n'est pas plus rentable dans les principales villes du pays. Donc, les Warao ont envisagé d'autres horizons. Et surtout, Trinité et Tobago, qui est très proche du delta, mais aussi et principalement le Brésil. Et c'est la route de Warao. Ils font la route à pied et il y a une section. Ce sont les principales destinations de Warao en Brésil, surtout la région amazonienne et nord-est. Et la principale ville où se trouvent des réfugiés Warao sont à Pacarima, c'est frontalière avec le Venezuela, à Boa Vista, capitale de Roraima, Manaus, Santarém et Belém do Pará. Les Warao ont été accueillis par des organisations humanitaires et aussi par des différents niveaux de gouvernement au Brésil. Et bien que la réponse et l'attitude de chacun d'eux est très dissimile. Le gouvernement central du Brésil, et je parle du gouvernement brésilien depuis l'époque de Dilma Rousseff, a considéré au Warao comme migrants ou réfugiés ou indigènes étrangers, sans considérer les droits particuliers qui les concernent en tant que population autochtone, et étant donné que le Brésil est signataire de plusieurs instruments internationaux pour la protection des peuples autochtones. Au Brésil, les Warao continuent avec l'activité des clochards, et bien qu'ils ont essayé de faire des ustensiles artisanaux, la vannerie traditionnelle Warao, qui s'est fait avec ce palmier qui est très commun dans les deltas, mais aussi la région des plains au Venezuela, s'appelle Ojida, en Warao Aribu, le langage de Warao, et en anglais c'est Maurice Pal, anglais palmière vache. Mais cette espèce est protégée par le gouvernement brésilien, donc les Warao n'ont pas la possibilité de fabriquer ce vannerie avec le palmier, et puisqu'ils n'ont pas l'autorisation de l'Instituto Brasileiro do meio ambiente e recursos naturais renováveis. Ouais, mais aussi le Warao sont dispersés pour d'autres villes du Brésil, bien qu'il s'agisse d'une migration temporaire, parce que le Warao au Brésil essaie de trouver des moyens pour aider ces familles dans les deltas, les fournir des choses nécessaires pour poursuivre la vie là-bas sous les conditions très difficiles auxquelles ils sont soumis et à cause de la crise au Venezuela, mais aussi pour l'accent d'assainissement des bases nécessaires et tout la catastrophe environnementale pour laquelle que traverse le delta. Et c'est fini. Oui.
Good afternoon. Today I'd like to speak about mobile knowledge traditions and use Inuit life aspects to infer what the Beringian migrations might have been like. To give some context on what the Beringian migrations were or what Beringia is, the region in dark brown are the landscape borders in present day. You see on the west, northeast Russia, and to the east, Alaska. And today, these two landmasses are separated by a distance of about 50 kilometers, but this was not always the case. And throughout prehistory, these landmasses joined and separated. But most recently, approximately 38,000 years ago, the sea levels fell just enough to merge these landmasses, and they remained joined till about 10,000 years ago. And it was in this crucial time period when humans first occupied the American continents. Approximately 37 to 35,000 years ago is when there was a stock of population that separated from East Asians, and it was from this population that would occasionally make incursions into the American continents. We see evidence of human occupation in north central Mexico approximately 33,000 years ago, and that is quite some distance from the Beringia land bridge past Canada and USA present day. And what is interesting is there have been a lot of studies that indicate that up until 12.8 thousand years ago, there were huge glaciers that blocked any possible land movement southwards from Canada to past to US to Mexico. So some authors also propose that humans might have traveled by sea coastally, which is not very surprising because we have evidence of coastal transport long before that. So this was a part of a larger out of Africa migration. So the general consensus is that our species originated in Africa about 200,000 years ago, and the most recent wave of migrations started about 70,000 years ago. And this particular set of migrations into the Americas started what seems to be around 38,000 years ago. And the genetic divergence that I talked about is more or less within the time period that this bridge was formed. Doesn't necessarily mean that these people recognize the formation of this bridge, but simply that their likely primary resources, which were migrating land mammals, would have altered their course of migrations, and in turn, by following them, they might have just crossed the border, the bridge. And there was also this remarkable species of seaweed called kelp, which houses several species of fish, shellfish, marine mammals, and even birds. So it has this whole ecosystem that revolves around it, and present day people still benefit greatly from the kelp ecosystem. So it's highly probable that prehistoric communities also did. And we shall see the aspect of how knowledge of these local ecologies would have helped these migrations. And these migrations happened over the course of several thousands of years. It's not similar to the contemporary migrations that happen over maybe a few years or a few months. So to give some context, 1,000 years could mean, even by conservative estimates, something like 40 generations of people. So they needed to be in contact with other communities to sustain their own populations in order to colonize over these large time periods, for which networks were very much necessary. So my methodology is to provide some archaeological data to establish the date of arrival in the Americas, genetic data to establish some working date of departure from Northeast Eurasia, and provide some reconstruction of what the past landscape might have looked like in the Beringia to assess the viability of migration, and supplement these with ethnographic accounts of the Canadian and Arctic Inuit, which are the communities that live in and around this area in the present day, or a little, we'll see later. Okay. So this Chiquite cave is where they found evidence of stone artifacts dating to something like 33 to 31,000 years ago, and it's located in northeast Mexico, which, as I said, it's already it's some great distance from the Beringian land bridge, and of course this evidence is contested, but these artifacts were found there, and the genetic data about the divergence from the East Asians is based on ancient DNA obtained from two individuals located in Alaska, which date to around 11,000 years ago, but they have sequenced these DNAs and discerned that the divergence happened sometime around 37 to 35,000 years ago. And this is what the landscape of Beringia looked like approximately 30,000 years ago. Unfortunately, there haven't been any reconstructions prior to this time, but as you can see, the area in brown indicate the possible regions where kelp might have existed. And this has led to several scientists to propose that the migrations might not have been inland, but close to the coast where these highly productive lands exist. For the ethnographic account, I have I've chosen just one of the several Inuit tribes, which is Nunamute, and these accounts come from the late 19th century because today the Inuit live vastly different lives. But in the late 19th century, they still relied on hunting, and this community spent most of its time inland hunting caribou or reindeer, which itself was a lot of movement because these migrate constantly, and in addition to that, they prefer to stay near the coast during the summers, spending their time fishing and hunting marine mammals. And as a consequence, they oscillated between inland and coast. And during this time, they also exchanged a lot of the accumulated resources with other groups that were more specialized to either of these places. And in a sense, mobility itself was an adaptation for them. And of course, mobility has always been the historical way of life before sedentism, but this sort of pattern mobility is in my view, an adaptation. And these are afforded by possibly buffers such as kelp forests, but also traditional ecological knowledge systems. Which could be practical information on hunting strategies or information about the specific timing and place where you could expect caribou herds, or information like predictive information like weather systems and knowledge how to build shelters and manage ecologies. And these often accumulated over the generations. And each generation transformed this knowledge that it got from the previous generation and applied it to its own context, to its own region. And these will also be enhanced by intertribal interactions, not just within their own community. And this could also have knowledge on other communities, how to avoid them or how to interact with them. And if you're stretching the definition of traditional ecological knowledge, could also have some imaginative dimensions. So with the present information, I would like to conclude that the Beringian migration likely occurred soon after the land bridge resurfaced, although this could change with new evidence. Journeys undertaken to exploit ecological systems and exchange resources resulted in these humans' gradual network dispersals over the space of several thousands of years, not just for the Beringian migrations, but if you think about it, this would have been the case in any such prehistoric migrations. And traditional ecological knowledge systems was very much a necessity because for these migrations, because these migrations were simply a consequence of their way of life, which were very mobile, and these likely occurred from the time that language and information transfer was a part of the human repertoire. And of course, these movements should themselves be seen as a crucial adaptation. Thank you.
So thank you all for your presentations. I do have a question for Ami. I don't know how to say it in French or in English. In French. Donc, tu as bien mentionné que les pratiques, les traditions de cette communauté, donc de pays Bassari, a bien stagné, si je peux dire comme ça, à cause de l'immigration, le tourisme aussi. Mais est-ce que tu penses qu'on peut faire une connexion, si je peux dire comme ça, entre le tourisme et le fait de pouvoir garder ces traditions? Donc pour attirer plus de touristes, donc la communauté puisse pratiquer plus ces traditions.
Okay, thank you all for your presentation. I have a question for Angel. French or English? Which one do
It's the same.
Okay, so you talked about the fact that the Warao population is based on a place where it had like drug trafficking. I was wondering if, regarding their social condition, those population were also suffering from person going like on drug trafficking or getting involved on this traffic because they were on the point where drugs.
Thank you, everyone. I have a question to Rufus. As you mentioned, as you mentioned that at the current the generation they are they are choosing their lifestyle the way they want, or the parents they are living on children. I would like to know what's the significance of the religion Buddhism with the current situation.
Alors, merci Clina pour la question. Moi, je pense que le tourisme ne peut pas constituer, par exemple, un facteur permettant aux Bassaris de développer de plus en plus leur culture, du moment où ils profitent du tourisme pour développer l'attraction touristique. Ils modifient les pratiques qu'ils faisaient, et les pratiques Bassari ont un but spécifique. Ce n'est pas des pratiques comme ça, des expressions comme ça. Par exemple, lors de des cérémonies d'initiation ou d'entrée à une nouvelle classe d'âge, ce sont ces genres de cérémonies qui sont organisées en fait. Et maintenant, pour plus attirer les touristes, ils organisent des événements de ce genre, juste pour des attractions touristiques. Et ça peut favoriser la perte de cette tradition qui avait un but spécifique, juste pour une source d'attraction touristique. Je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu à ta
question. Regarding the drug trafficking, Venezuela and also the Delta is just a country, and the case of the Delta region, for traffic. I mean, Venezuela is not a producer of drugs, and as long as I have read, the Warao haven't been involved in drug trafficking, but they have suffered the consequence of their territory being used as a place of transit. The drug goes to Trinidad and Tobago, And they suffering from, well, it's a territory that has been militarized. There's a presence of a state, but in Venezuela, the agents of states are articulated to the mafias, or also to what has been called the miners pranatos, that is a mining association to illegal mining association that substitutes the state in some regions. That happens especially in the Guayana region. That's south to the Orinoco River. But more or less the same dynamic is observed in the Delta. I have read about people who has been killed by the military, just for the military to ensure the territory for the drug trafficking. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Shuban, for your question. So the current significance of Buddhism in the current situation in Mongolia, it's a little bit, somewhat tricky to answer, but also somewhat simplistic. I'd say with the newer generations that are coming in and choosing their own lifestyle, particularly in places like Ulaanbaatar, there certainly seems to be more of, how do I say it, sort of an apathetic approach to it. So they're not strict Buddhists per se, but they do believe in it to an extent, or at least this is what I've experienced so far. But it is still a resurgence from what it was from the 20th century because of the persecutions from the communist governments. So it's there, but it's, yeah, it's there. No worries.
Hello, my question goes to Angel. I just want to understand a little bit more, like, les enjeux around, like, I thought it was very interesting what you said about these people that are starting to have new economical activities in Brazil, like relating to the plants that are protected. Like, it made me think of Mexico in the case of the peyote and the way it's controlled. Like, yeah, you can use it for ceremonial purposes, but with a limit. And you said something about the convention for indigenous people, and I was checking it, a little bit of it, and it talks like mostly about les droits de l'homme. Alors, I understand that the practices and the economical activities have to do with the well-being of the populations, but at the same time, I'm a little bit confused, and I think there are lots of ideas right now that I'm trying to put together. But how would you say, or I don't know, I would like you to discuss a little bit more a way to cope with this situation, because at the end, even if indigenous people don't respect in the same way like les frontières, parce qu'ils sont transnationaux, en même temps, je trouve que le Brésil, à la fin, n'a pas... Je sais pas, je suis un peu partout, c'est juste, je voudrais un peu plus de discussions par rapport à ça parce que je les trouve très intéressants. Merci.
Non j'ai curiosité sur s'il y a quelques informations sur quand les Inuits ils sont nés, ils sont arrivés. Ils se sont formés pour l'indienne. Comment ça s'appelle? No, indiano. Ah, in English. When the Inuit are born, if you have some data on the ethnicity of these Nord people.
I also have a brief question to Angel, because you mentioned in the beginning that the Waraho became the controllers of a territory that was previously occupied by another group. I would like to know if this group still exists and where they went, what happened.
Italian. With regards to the origin of Inuit, I'm really not sure, to be honest, because it's very complicated with the movements of people in and out of Beringia. There were also movements out of Beringia at the same time, and of course this happened 20,000 years ago. But after that, these populations were centered in and around the Arctic and Canada, and they evolved into what became to be known as the Inuit. But after about 10,000 years ago, there was no movement from northeast Russia into the Americas, as far as we know. So it should have been these people that settled into northern America after 10,000 years ago and came to be known as the Inuit. And the Inuit are there are hundreds of tribes, it's not just one. So yeah, it's these people. And with regards to the traditions that they brought, I'm only aware of the adaptations with regards to the ecology, the animals that they relied on, and basically the food preservation techniques in the snow, and the use of sleds, dog sleds, the construction of igloos in the snow, and with regards to cultural traditions, the only one that I know is it's that some of the Inuits use face tattoos and such, and they also have their own system of astrology, as far as I know. But all these would have evolved within once. There's no evidence of that they brought it from northeastern Russia, as far as I know. So.
I'm going to reply to Diana's question. The Warao has been begging for money in a Venezuelan city since a long time. It's mostly women who ask for money, while men keeps the things. They have a sort of camps in the cities, but it's mostly women and children who ask for money. This, in a certain way, mirrored the activities, the sexual division of the sexual division of work in the Delta, where women are in charge of doing the pottery, collecting fruit, and this is in a certain way adapted to the city. As for the control, the permission they have to use the moriche palm in Brazil, because in the first moment of the migration towards Brazil, they were making pottery. Not pottery, it's not the word. They were making artisanal products with this moriche palm. Basketry, that's the word. Thank you. Well, but they need for the permission. They don't have a permission, so the only activity that that left for them is to ask for money. And it's been necessary because, in spite of help of different levels of the Brazilian government providing help, this is they are not well articulated. They have been helped by the municipalities, the government of states, the Amazonian states especially, where they migrate, and the central government, starting from Dilma Rousseff. But it's not only help, because the central government in Brazil have seen these indigenous people as foreigners rather than indigenous people. Certainly, the Warao traditional territory has nothing to do with Brazil. It's rather a people that inhabit in Guyana, Suriname, and Venezuela, not Brazil. Nevertheless, Brazil have signed a convention called it's a convention, the convention number 169 of the International Working Organization that recognize some special rights to indigenous peoples, and one of those rights is that the existence of the indigenous peoples in America, the continent, because the country is the United States, the continent, America, is to precede the existence of the states, and they have the right to cross borders. Well, that's it. But this consideration as foreigners has had traumatic consequence for the Warao because they have been deported to Venezuela in 2014 and 2016. And it's only thanks to the intervention of the indigenous organization in Brazil that the Brazilian central government had their awareness of its duty to fulfill the compromise it has signed. As for the question of Professor Osterbeck, there was a people that already inhabited the delta called the Siawani. No, not much is known about them, but they don't currently exist. They have been assimilated by the Warao. The difference between this culture, well, basically, the Warao learned to live in the delta because they take the technology of the Siawani. But the difference in material culture is that the Siawani were working on stone. The Warao not. Stone is an element, a very scarce element in the delta, because the delta is mostly water. So this is probably one of the reasons Warao abandoned the stone of an element of their material culture. Scarcity. For me.
Suggests that you, in your final text, deal a little bit with the method of work, because this was not so clear in the presentation. I don't have specific recommendations to Amy. Yeah, in this case of Angelis, again, also the methods. Please focus a bit. And a comment on this issue. I don't know for all the regions. From the perspective of the Brazilian authorities, might relate to the potential clash with African descent populations, which in the region have an economy which is largely centered on the Mauritia trees and producing the basketry. So maybe they are already very poor, and maybe I'm not sure. I'm just guessing, but it wouldn't justify, but it would make sense in trying to find a reason to avoid further clashes between the indigenous populations coming in and African descent populations established there, because of the limitations of the market and not so much of the raw material. There is not really a problem, at least in Maranhão, that I know quite well. There's not really a problem of shortage of raw material, but there is a problem of market. There is an overproduction. And so this methodological issue, and and also no major observations to Diviendo. So thank you very much, and we all enjoyed your presentations. We get to the end of this day, except for Pierluigi, and we resume tomorrow morning, 9:30. Try to be here on 9:30 because we will try to do, as you have seen in the new version of the last version of the program, you can check it on the website, but it's basically similar with minor amendments. And we will try to complete everything in the morning before lunchtime, so that in the beginning of the afternoon I may have a brief conversation with DCLAM students, all right? Of course, if we need the afternoon, we will also have it, but in any case, I think it is possible to do it in the morning. Okay?